Hi, my name is Bethany Nelson, and I'm a teacher. That's how I orient. I'm a teacher. I also do other things. I was an actor. I am a director. I do a lot of original playmaking with urban kids of color from under-resourced communities. I'm a college teacher. I'm the head of the graduate program at Emerson College, and I'm the area head of the undergraduate program at Emerson College, both in theater education. And I've spent virtually my entire professional life doing work around the use of theater as a tool for teaching things other than theater. Right now, I teach along with my college teaching. I run a program called the Emerson Theater. It was on hold for 2 years because of COVID, but it's starting up again this October. And what we do is create original plays around the issues that constrain kids' lives and dictate their futures. And we've created through that about, I want to say about 15 or 16 shows across 7 years. It was a lot. And about all sorts of topics, the relationship between kids and the police. One of my favorites was called Lies My Mother Told Me, which is about mother country and the lies that America offers her immigrants to get them here and get them to work for us. We did one called Childhood is Fun, because it's not fun for many people. And we've just done a lot of different shows across the years, and all instigated by the kids. We did one called Inside because we were having a conversation once, and it came out that out of 21 kids in this group, 7 of them had a parent who had been in jail for at least 2 years. A third of them, which was horrifying. And so they wanted to do something on incarceration, but because not everybody had that experience, we did something on physical, mental, and emotional incarceration, self-incarceration and incarceration by others. And the type of playmaking I do is so effective. Originally, I went into it with the idea that we would teach them skills, that they would develop self-advocacy skills, they would develop writing skills or whatever. But even after just the second show, what became of interest to them was to educate their primarily white audience on what's going on, what their lives are about. And it became a tool for radical social change. And so I was like, okay. And we started working on it. And I ended up writing a book about it. Not just about Emerson Theater, but about some other playmaking projects that I had done in Chelsea, Mass. And the connection between what happens in playmaking and best practices in education, constructivism, multiple intelligences theory, culturally relevant teaching, and current emerging research in brain development. Because I read this book and I was like, wow, this is exactly what happens with these kids. And I just won a national award for it. I was very surprised. It's called Urban Playmaking, Constructivist Teaching with a Radical Agenda, which pretty much describes me. And it was fabulous. I mean, the work with them is the best part of my year consistently. And I love teaching. I love teaching. And still on Saturdays, the group meets on Saturdays. And every Saturday, I'm 66 years old, okay? Every Saturday I wake up and I'm like, what was I thinking? Oh my God. And I drag myself out of bed and I drive to Boston. And at the end of the day, I feel like, okay, I know what I did with my day. And it's a very satisfying thing. And I'm still friends with a bunch of the kids who started with the program in 2013. One of them is the theater teacher at Chelsea High School now, and so we have a legacy, and that's important to me. I feel like you're here to do something with your life, and if you can figure out what it is and do that, you'll be happier and you'll contribute. you're here to contribute, right?
So when you start Bethany, what did you inspire to become a teacher, to do what you do today?
I never wanted to be a teacher, and because I hated that first week of school every year. I was that kid who would just sit in the room and cry because it was like, I'm in prison for another year. And people were always like, oh, you should be a teacher. I was like, I'm not going to be a teacher. And then when I went back to college, I was 23. I bummed around for 5 years, and I had a class with Bob Colby, and I was like, it was a special project doing theater and education, which was creating an original piece. And I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I know. Because I love kids, but I at that time didn't want to have any kids. I now have 4. Never say never. I love theater, but I didn't want to be an actor. The mirror is just too close, right? And it just was the perfect confluence of my skills and interests. And I've never done anything else. That was when I was 23. I'm 66, so 43 years. I have never done anything else but that kind of work.
In your opinion, today, what are the challenges that teachers are facing?
They're among the most challenging aspects that I've ever seen. I've been in education for 43 years. I've never seen it like this. We had 2 years of COVID. Everybody was bemoaning the fact, right? Oh no, now the kids have fallen behind. They need, they've lost 2 years of learning. And then they come back live and they say to teachers, and now you have to fix that in 1 year. Well, they can't, okay? And also they went through COVID too. So you have all these traumatized people together jammed into a building, and the expectations of society saying, okay, fix that. And teachers are like, yeah, well, I'm not magic. So as many expectations as have been on teachers across the 10 years of No Child Left Behind, well, 15 years really, it was nothing compared to this. Because now you still have the testing in Massachusetts. They haven't abandoned it. Though I like to make this point. Under the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is current national policy, you don't have to give a single standardized test. You are required to give 3 tests across kindergarten through 12th grade. None of them have to be standardized tests. And what have we done? Nothing. We are still doing the same thing. It didn't work for 15 years, and we're still doing it. And now we're saying to teachers who have just come out of COVID with kids who are 2 years behind socially, 2 years behind academically, oh yeah, and by the way, you still need to meet adequate yearly progress. Like, that's ridiculous. That's so right now, and also now, there 500,000 teachers quit last year. And so you have a teacher shortage, you have expectations that are off the charts, you have the country declaring that COVID is over when it isn't, and so all of the protections that teachers felt when they first went back are gone, and the number of people to do it is reduced. There are several school systems in Massachusetts that I know of who cannot hire enough paras to meet the requirements of their system. They're out of compliance, but there's nothing that they can do about it because there is no one who wants to do that job under these circumstances.
Yeah.
I mean, it's astounding what's happening in education right now.
And in terms of the students, what do you see?
The students in public schools?
Yes.
It's been interesting because they really are like 2 years younger than they are chronologically. I went in, where was I working? Oh, I know. I went into Chelsea High just because I like to stay in the classroom once in a while. Keeps you from being too pie in the sky when you tell people what can happen in classrooms. You really want to be there once in a while to go, yeah, that can't happen. Right? That's because otherwise you're setting people up to feel like failures or like somehow they're letting you down. Anyway, so I went and I did these classes with a friend of mine who is a Emerson Theater graduate who is now the theater teacher. And I was shocked by two things. The sophomores and juniors really do seem like 8th and 9th graders, just in terms of the social stuff that goes on, their ability to control themselves or to focus and manage, to sequence themselves, their ability with English, because Chelsea has like, I want to say at least 85% Spanish speaking at home.
Okay.
And because they were in strictly Spanish speaking environments for 2 years, their English is not where it usually is by 9th or 10th grade. And so you see that too. But the real thing is critical thinking, that their ability to imagine, their ability to problem solve, their ability to think like this instead of like this is very different than it was 3 years ago. Very different. And so I have compassion for the teachers who are expected to just move it along, right? Move them ahead, because you're not working with the same kids that you were working with 3 years ago. You're working with a different population with a very specific set of needs.
For someone that is going to start a program at Emerson now, teaching, what would be your advice to them? Quit before you start. I know there are challenges, but
I always say the same thing, and it's true, which is I truly believe that teaching is one of the truly noble endeavors, right? And why we act like it's some second tier job, I will never understand. Nothing exists without it. We don't have banks without it. Capitalism, kiss that goodbye. There's no government, there are no buildings, there are no cars. Education is core to every single thing that we have, in not just in this country, in the world. And in the United States, we act like teachers are and I've never understood why. I'm a nerd for education. I love education. And I always tell students the same thing. It's, you make people in those rooms. That's what we're doing. No other organization, system, structure has that kind of access to kids for that. We have them for 5 days a week, 7 hours a day, 180 days a year for 14 years. No one else has that kind of access. We're making people. And you have to think about, not about what the expectations of the system are, that comes later, not about whether you have summers off, but that's a nice thing. But you really have to think about, what is it that I think is important that these kids know? And what kind of person do I want to have come out of this experience that I'm offering them? Especially in theater, where it's not a tested subject. They have a lot of latitude about, and if you look at systems in Massachusetts, there are many different ways in which theater is used. You have your traditional, intro to theater, acting 1, acting 2, and stagecraft. But you also have people who are doing theater for social justice and comedy writing and Shakespeare as a core curriculum. You have a lot of different opportunities to create a curriculum that reflects what you think is important. And so a lot of the work that I do with students is about helping them figure out what it is they think is important in relationship to this subject area, this powerful, powerful tool that we wield. And what do they want to do with that tool?
And can you tell us a little bit about your work that I think you share a little bit in the beginning with the students from the high school, the urban kids, and if you continue, probably you do it right every Saturday.
Yes.
Okay.
Originally, it was going to be a 9-week program, right? We were going to meet for 9 weeks. We would put together some play, and then that's it, right?
Yeah.
And then they were like, no, we want to keep coming. We want to keep doing it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so across a couple of years, it went from being 9 weeks to 12 weeks to 20 weeks to about 35 weeks a year. The only reason we don't meet the whole time is because the school's closed in the summer. So, and we meet, I build the community of the room. They need to be in community with each other. The first group that we did had kids from 3 systems, from Lawrence Public Schools, from Chelsea Public Schools, and from Cambridge French and Latin. And I just said to them, we have 3 schools represented here. We have to be one group. I'm asking you to let yourself work with other people. And they did. So that we, they did all this stuff and they were working together. And I was like, I'm so good, right? I'm so proud. And then lunch came and they all sat back with their schools. And, and I was like, well, they work together. It's okay. They're let them sit with their friends and stuff. And then I had to go to the restroom. And when I came back, they were all sitting on the floor in a big group singing together. Mm-hmm. And I realized 2 things. 1, I should have left the room earlier. And 2, that it isn't just that I want them to bond as a group. Mm-hmm. They want that for themselves, right? And so starting from that premise, in every group, I have focused on the establishment of community as the beginning, and only when the group really feels like they're beginning to gel do I start looking at, okay, what topic? What are we going to do? And then we do a bunch of work on creating scenes and creating movement pieces, and in some cases music, depending on who's in there, and writing monologues and writing about their own lives, because part of what makes it compelling for them is that if we're working on, for example, the relationship with the police of young people of color, their experiences are what bonds them to the topic. And so I'll say, what's the worst experience, or what's the time you felt the best about the police? And so those pieces are interwoven in the final show. So it's partly autobiographical, it's partly a comment on society, it's partly, and my goal, more than anything else, is for them to think about their lives, to think about why it is that everybody they know, in Chelsea, for example, nobody makes it out of that city. Like a tiny handful, right? Mm-hmm. And why that is, and that it isn't because they have personal failings, it's a societal construction that keeps them there. And I don't want to tell them that, but through hearing stories from each other, they go like, wait a minute, we all have the same story here. And they begin to realize it. And that's higher order thinking. And we've abandoned higher order thinking as we have pushed for increased test scores. We've really left it behind. And except in wealthy white schools, except in private schools where they don't have to take MCAS tests, right? And so there you can learn to think, well, you're creating an underclass. We need to be teaching people to think. So for me, that's part of the payoff too, is when they go, I go, yes, that's right. So, and it's exciting, and the shows that they make are powerful and moving.
I made myself.
Yes. Yep. I made myself, and that was really the first one I did with that population, and I learned a lot from them on that, because I went in with, I was doing my doctoral work, right? And I'm looking at collective action, how teaching them about collective action and the role of collective action. And so I had this title in my head, on the shoulders of giants,
I love that, yeah.
Yeah, they hated that. So we're doing all this work, and they're really excited about it and stuff. I go, okay, so the title that's in my head for this is On the Shoulders of Giants, and what do you think that means? And they're like, and you could just see the air go out of the room. And we end up talking about, they're like, people who did important things. And I'm like, yes. And they're like, Martin Luther King, Cesar Chavez, I was just like, oh, this is bad. Yeah. And then I said, okay, so everybody here stands on someone's shoulders, whose shoulders do you stand on?
Someone they could relate to.
That's right. Yeah. And the kids were like, looking at the floor, shifting from side to side. And it was awkward because they really liked me. Yeah. And they wanted to do it, but they were just like, And finally I guilted them, right? I go, well, you don't have to talk about it, but everybody here stands on someone's shoulders. And, if you don't acknowledge them, it's like dishonoring their contribution to your life. Anthony, I remember him. my grandmother, my sister, and it's going around the circle, but they could have been saying, we hate you. So that was bad. But one kid in there, Brian, did not answer, and I was really surprised because he was extremely engaged in the process. I was very surprised. And later I heard him say to his teacher, Amy, I don't stand on anyone's shoulders. I made myself. And I was like, okay, because I made myself. And that, I heard that. And so the next day I came in and I had asked his permission and I said, Brian said he made himself. So I want you to think of a moment in your life when you made yourself. And I want you to, what was it? Who did you take control from? Would you do it again? Was it a public moment or a private moment? Don't answer the questions, but write it as a monologue. And they did, and it became the center of the show. And I learned a lot because I went in there with this sort of assumptions, right? I'm white, middle class. Assumptions about where their pride would lie, where their sense of self would lie. I was completely wrong. And it was very humbling. But after that, because it was research, I interviewed them. And so they got to explain it. And the thing that they took out of that project was the incredible sense of community they developed through doing it. And the comment that sticks with me is this one kid said, I didn't realize how strong we were. All of us have gone through this stuff, and I didn't realize how strong we were. That was the beginning, and I realized at the time, oh, this is a new direction for my life. And I really have never looked back. It was profound for them. It was profound for me. I'm a teacher because I love learning stuff, and I learn a lot from them and understanding the world through their eyes, but also the conclusions they draw from something educate me. And so that's a good job. In my world, that's a good job.
Yes. I want to share, I don't know if I shared with you before, but I studied at Emerson College, and I was not one of your students at the time. And I was taking a class, and the teacher said, well, there was a march, I think it was the Black Lives Matter that we went. And she said, and also there's this play, and I went, first I marched with her and my colleagues, and then we went to watch the play. And as I was watching the play, it was when I realized that's it. I wanted to do this, exactly this. This is what I was looking for, because I watched those kids and I was amazed by how they approached, their stories and how they used their narratives and how powerful that was. And I watched your interaction with them at the end.
Yeah.
And I remember one came close to us and he looked at us and he touched our hands at the time, inviting us to be part of the solution.
Yes, come change the world.
Oh my God, I was like, I couldn't. So I started taking your classes after that.
Yeah, I remember this.
Yes, it was powerful. No.
Which one? What was it? Working on Wings to Fly?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
That was an incredible show.
Yeah, it was so powerful. And then I remember every time you had a show, I went back and watched. I brought my mom to watch. Because it's like, people, you have to see this. This is happening, and you make this accessible to them and to a whole community. And you probably make a lot of people uncomfortable.
Very. So we did a show once called Pain, Perceptive Adolescence in an Ignorant Nation. And it came off of a single quote that I really liked. Pain is there to tell you that there's something wrong. And so we did a whole exploration of the kind of pain that tells you there's something wrong, because kids, especially the kids I work with, they become inured to it, They don't recognize it as pain anymore. They're just like, oh. And anyway, so it started out with racist language and, fat phobic language and LGBTQ phobic language and all this stuff. And they wanted to be a comedy, which they always say that. We want to make something funny. I say, fine. They cannot make something funny and they do stuff. In Lies My Mother Told Me, I said, okay, you have to do an interaction with the police. You're at a protest and make it comic. Go. And I came back with this scene where the police pushed them down, kicked them, and maced them. And the whole audience, all the kids, we were like this. That's not funny. They were like, no, it is funny, because I was like, it really is not funny. And so, but anyway, so they, so we were making this comedy, and they created cheers of racist words, and then Donald Trump got elected in the middle of it, and the whole piece changed, and the whole ending piece was about fear and their fear of, because many of them do not have status, they're not documented and stuff. But anyway, so one of my students saw it. She was on the planning committee for the Evie Awards, which is like this Emerson award show. They were like, we want you to come, and we want you to do that on the award show. I can't do that on the award show. That's not going to be okay.
Our next performance is from Emerson Theater.
Led by faculty member Bethany Nelson, Emerson Theater is a program in which Boston area high school students develop and perform original theatrical works. They use music and spoken word to tell stories and share issues that affect their lives.
This provocative piece reflects on the promise the U.S. makes to its immigrants and rewrites the Declaration of Independence in light of recent national events.
Please welcome to the stage the students from Emerson Theater.
I am the American dream. I am promises guaranteed to be kept.
I am financially stable.
I am opportunity.
I am hope.
I am safety.
I go to work with a smile on my face.
I am the mother smile as she watches her son aboard the school bus.
I am equality.
I am the red, white, and blue stars and stripes.
I am your backbone.
I am your desires.
I am the promises of our founding fathers.
I am the American dream.
Hell yeah!
F-A-G-G-O-D, get that away from me.
You mean F?
Feminine.
Give me an A.
Ass attacker.
Give me a G.
Gagging.
Give me a G.
Gay.
Give me an O.
Obviously not
Give
straight.
me a T.
Tranny.
What's that spell?
Don't say that word.
S is for Spanish, for no is still no. P is for putas, see them everywhere. I is immigration, keep them out. C is for culture, that's different from ours. K is for killers, killers, killers. S-P-I-C. K.
Don't say that word.
Hell yeah.
Give me an N.
Not allowed.
Give me an I.
Ignorant.
Give me a D.
Gang member.
Give me a G.
Guilty.
Give me an E.
Exempt.
Give me an R.
Rope.
What's that spelled?
Don't say that word.
No. You can say that word. Let's make America great again.
We are living in real fear. And if you can't see our pain, then screw you. We have cried, screamed, marched, and protested for so long, so at this point you can see it, but you choose not to. So screw you. Screw your privilege, screw your American dream with your nice house, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, and screw your dog. Screw this country. I will never have the privilege that you do to ignore hate, to ignore somebody that hates every part of your identity, but most important, the people that stand behind it. I will never stop fighting. Never. We are in pain. I am in pain, and turning your hearts and not using your privilege, your voice, to fight for us is wrong.
I
And the American nightmare.
am unkept promises and broken dreams.
I am delusion.
I am not making it.
I am boundaries, obstacles, and struggles.
I'm society. I tell you one thing, but in reality, I will never accept you.
I am the creases on a young student's forehead.
I'm scared to even try.
I am waking up and I'm alone.
I am the result of losing the American dream.
I am
And the American nightmare.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Everyone in the world gets their story told. It's shocking now because you have TikTok and you have a bunch of social media. Everybody's story gets told, and the only stories you still don't hear are the stories of people who don't have money, are the stories of people of color who live in communities of color who don't have resources. You don't hear their stories, and when you do, in the rare occasion when they're televised, it's so distorted. It's a crime story, or it's a teen pregnancy story, or whatever. There is no balance in that. And so for me, I feel like they're telling their story the way they want to tell their story, and I'm going to help them do that. I'm going to help make that work as theater, so that the audience comes away not just going like, oh, those poor kids, but comes away going, I was emotionally impacted by that. I want to change things for those kids, because I want to change things for those kids, and I can't do it alone. So, sorry, that was a really long answer to a short question.
Well done. I was one that was touched by it, so
Yes.
it impacted me, and and I'm glad it did. One thing that I share with you, I don't know if you remember that, but I'll try not to cry. If I do, that's okay. It's part of it.
I already did today, so you owe me one. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a dream. I was in your class, and it was the first years I was going through a lot. So I was going through a lot during that time, and I kept coming to the class. I don't know how, but we know why.
This. Yes, I remember this.
And I had this dream. I saw you and students in this tiny boat, and it was crowded. And I was like wondering at the time why I see that, but I couldn't make sense of it. Then after that, I was like, Bethany's kind of like a captain, but at the same time, each one of those kids were also learning to be a captain.
Yes.
In their own lives, and you were there guiding and being there for them throughout the process. So it's kind of like the way I see it, and no matter what, the ocean, everything, the obstacles that you go through, you have that place that community that is together to go through it together, and we all need each other. So I want you to talk a bit for your perspective, how important it is theater education today, and beyond today.
Yes. Theater is important because it's creative, and it encourages divergent thinking, and it's fun. We have so little fun in the world right now, and kids have less fun even than adults. It's kind of backwards, but anyway. But the really important thing about it is that it's good education, that it actually helps them develop higher order thinking. It develops their brain. So when you think in a higher order way, when you think this way instead of this way, it causes the development of new neurons and dendrites, little things that link between neurons, and myelin sheathing, the coating on that dendrite that makes ideas travel faster. And so the more you think in that way, the more developed those components of your brain become. When you don't think in that way, those either don't develop, or you use them once, they shrivel up and disappear again. And so there are a bunch of different ways that theater teaching works with brain development. And I'll give you one more, okay? One of them is risk, like suppressing risk. So you have something in your brain called the amygdala, and it's that lizard brain. It causes you to freeze or to run or to fight. And if you're scared enough, it causes what's called an amygdala hijack. And when you see it on a PET scan, the entire brain is lit up. It's like a network of bright light. And when you have fear that causes that to happen, it suppresses higher order thinking for 15 to 20 minutes. So in a class where you call on a kid and they freeze and they're scared, and then you can't get them to speak, a lot of times that's because they're in the middle of an amygdala hijack and they literally can't think. They can't think of an answer. And we look at that kid and go, slacker, or, oh, needs services, right? But in reality, that kid may just be scared and risk averse, but that risk aversion builds on itself. So what you can do instead of that, this negative cycle, is you can do things that build community in the room, that make them less afraid to speak in front of each other. And by making them less afraid, you actually allow them to develop those neurons, those dendrites, that myelin sheathing. You increase their ability to think in higher order ways, to develop their own brains. And the second thing about it is that brains are actually structured to develop communally, not individually. So theater, without you having to sit down and go, okay, let me explain this to you. There's an amygdala, and you don't want it to. You build community in the room, which theater does almost effortlessly. You can build on that every day by simple warm-up games. And you prepare kids to be able to develop their brains because they work with each other. It's a natural part of theater. They work with each other. They feel safe working with each other over time. And so those are just these hugely important components and help to explain why theater works so well with so many different kinds of kids. For kids who are otherwise school averse and avoid learning, theater often works for them. That often is the class they succeed in. And there's a reason for that. And so that's part of my new thing, because I've worked in this field for 40 years and I was in theater before that. And I've seen that dynamic again and again and again. But then when I actually could explain why it happens that way, it seemed really important to me that other people knew that too. Because it's an argument for including theater in every curriculum, or incorporating it in in history and language arts, because that's part of my background too, is that I use theater as a tool for curriculum teaching. So for kids who otherwise have difficulty acquiring knowledge because of a variety of reasons, you can use theater to teach that knowledge. It's such a hugely effective tool. And it's amazing to me that we don't acknowledge that more consistently and push on that in terms of resources and funding.
Anyway. And what is multicultural education, and how can we use it today in a classroom?
Multicultural ed is kind of an old-fashioned term now, though I still use it. My classes still call that. But now it's called culturally relevant teaching, or culturally responsive teaching, or anti-racist teaching. When you talk about public schools, they're structured to facilitate the learning of white middle-class kids. And they're designed that way and they work that way. And now, test scores wise, the population that does the best on tests is determined by income level. The higher the income, the better the test scores. The lower the income, the worse the test scores. How's that for a kick in the head? But anyway, so we have white middle class oriented schooling. Very individual, very competitive, and very focused on the individual achievement, individual outcomes. And so part of multicultural education is about changing those dynamics to more closely reflect the dynamics of kids of color. 50% of students, right?
Yeah.
We're getting there, are kids of color. And so why are we teaching only to this one population? So in multicultural education, or culturally relevant teaching, or culturally responsive teaching, is about shifting the dynamics in the classroom to more closely reflect other populations. It isn't just about teaching Black history, or teaching Puerto Rican history, or teaching Cape Verdean history, or whatever population is primary in the school, although that's part of it, right? Women's history, all that stuff is part of it. Teaching novels that reflect a variety of cultural orientations, have a variety of authors, it's also about how your class is structured. It's about the foundations of how things go. So I'm gonna give you two examples, okay? One is this. So this is a simple difference between white middle class populations and both lower income populations and populations of color. White middle class parents control their kids through questions. Are you ready for your tub? Do you want to have dinner now? Now, it's a command. It's a command. Little kids know they can't go like, nah, I'm really not. I'm watching TV. I think I'll just sit it out here. They recognize it's a command. Well, in homes of color and in lower income homes, commands tend to be commands. So it's time for dinner. It's time for your tub. Go upstairs, please. So both those kids, the ones for whom commands are commands and questions are actually questions, and those for whom questions are commands, they go to a white middle class structured school. 89% of elementary school teachers are white. So they go into this class and the teacher says, okay, are we ready for story time?
No.
And this little kid's building a truck, in the block area. And he's like, no, not really not. I'm going to stay here. He doesn't go. All the other little kids, the little white kids recognize, oh, that's a command. They line up, they go sit in story time. And the teacher says, Tyrone, I said it's time for story time. And what does that kid say? No, you didn't. And he's right. She didn't. She asked if they wanted to go to story time. And so he gets in trouble. He ends up sitting in the timeout chair for having a bad attitude. And he's mad. He's pissed, And so then it's like, oh, Tyrone has a bad attitude. And then they thoughtfully, because teachers are helpful to other teachers, they go, the kindergarten teacher says to the first grade teacher, oh my God, you have Tyrone. Well, I'm just saying, he does not listen. Right? And he backtalks. So just be prepared. And that first grade teacher goes, he's not going to backtalk me. So the first time Tyrone steps out of line, that teacher lands on him. Tyrone ends up in timeout again. And Tyrone starts to get withdrawn or angry. One of those two things. Either becomes really difficult outwardly or silent stewing in the back. And is seen as the problem. Well, he's not the problem. You have a cultural translation issue, right? And so what I always tell teachers is, when it's a command, say it as a command. Everyone understands a command is a command. Little white kids understand, oh, that command is a command.
Yeah.
But not everybody understands that the question is a command. And you're disadvantaging those kids. And the second one I'll give you is that in schools, they did this study of an upper middle class preschool, which the researcher called the Harmony Preschool, which I thought was funny, and a Head Start program that was all black kids, all black. And in this Harmony Preschool, the kids were grouped in teams of 4, and there were 4 stations. So there was a sand station, a water station, a clay station, and a coloring station, right? And 4 kids around each station. And then after 15 minutes, the teacher would ring this little chime, like bing, one of those bar chimes, bing. And all the little kids would move to a new station, but not together. They were regrouped every time they went to a new station. So even though it seemed like they were working together, they actually were not working together. And when the teacher would come up and comment on what was happening, that is quite an interesting picture. What can you tell me about it? And the kid goes, it's a dog. The teacher goes, well, that is an excellent dog. Every comment that the teacher made was to an individual kid. Never to the group. Never a comment like, I see that there's no sand on the floor. Excellent work, right? Where at the Head Start program, everything was done as a group. They rose and fell as a group. And so when, for example, the teacher said, it's time for a story circle, everybody come to the rug, everybody would line up at the edge of the rug and wait for every kid to be there. And the teacher would go, Tyrone, we're all waiting for you at the rug. Tyrone put the blocks away, Tyrone comes and stands on the edge of the rug, and they all go and sit down together. And at the end of the day, when the teacher's reflecting on how they did, she doesn't say, well, everybody did really well except Tyrone. What she says is, we had a good day today, we all got along well, we had a little trouble transitioning. Tomorrow, we're not going to have that trouble transitioning, we're all going to transition together. And it's an extreme difference in orientation. So those little kids come to school with the expectation that it's about the group. It's not about there's a quote by Walter Nobles, because I am, we are, because we are, I am. And that is the orientation. They come into a situation in which it's all about the individual. And so they're disadvantaged because the teacher looks at them as, he's so clingy. He just can't do anything by himself. Well, yeah, it's cultural, okay? There are a bunch of different things like that.
Yeah.
And so multicultural ed is partly about training teachers. Here's how you were responsive to the whole group. Here's how you're responsive, as equally responsive to the kid who's not like you as the kid who is like you, or whom you perceive as being like you. And also to look at the behavior of kids and not make assumptions that are based on those embedded, culturally based norms, right? They look at the kid and they go, what a bad kid. He doesn't know how to, he doesn't know how to listen. He doesn't know he'll never do all that kind of stuff. And it creates a second-class citizenship for kids of color in primarily white classrooms, and it interferes with their learning. They get channeled into lower tracks. They are in the brown group for reading instead of the gold or silver group. All those things that are like little, I think of them as check marks on a list, right? And so part of what multicultural education or culturally relevant teaching or culturally responsive teaching, or even better, anti-racist teaching is designed to do, is to educate the people who can change that. It's like the teachers don't do that anymore. Yeah. And once they know what I have found, and they will change what they do. They won't be perfect. It's those are tough, especially the question command is very tough to change, but they can do it, right? And they're willing to do it. When they understand the inequity, the desire is to fix it. But we don't teach it. We have to teach it. It has to be a requirement, And it isn't rocket science. You don't have to completely re-educate yourself to be able to do it effectively. There are simple things you can do, all of which are underlaid by the idea you don't know everything. You think you know everything, but you don't know everything. It's much easier to change yourself, to actually look at what's happening around you and go, okay. So anyway.
You used to do an activity in the classroom that I love, that you gave us a time to respond, like 5 minutes if you could go back in time, what you would say, who would you call. So I want to do a little bit of that over here to you. So So
My own practice coming back to bite me. This isn't good. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you could go back in time, what would you say to your younger self, to your students?
What I'd say to my younger self is it's learning is only boring if you let it be. Like, really, you cannot rely on someone else to make it interesting. It's your interest that makes it interesting. And what I would tell myself as a student is find a way to be interested. First of all, make your teacher do a better job. And secondly, learning is so tasty. It's the most delicious thing. And if I could afford to be in school for the rest of my life, I probably would be, but I can't. So that's what I would tell myself. And that's also what I tell students. Like, you have to find a way to be interested in stuff you don't know yet. Because there are I have a card in my office that says, there are two handles by which you can grasp the future. One is anxiety. The other is hope, right? And I feel that way about teaching. You can grasp the handle that says, this is boring and unimportant, or you can grasp the handle that says, what's this about? And if you can make yourself grasp that handle, you're in better shape because you really do drive it. And no one is more effective with a teacher to inspire a teacher than an interested student. What I tell my students, because I still have them, I'm still working, is very similar. Just because you can yell about something doesn't mean you should. Think carefully about what you want to see changed, work on that. If you're the parent of a child, that's one thing. You have all the time in the world to fix that. Whatever goes, whether if you did something where you go, oh, I lost my temper, or if they did something where they said, oh, I said something I didn't mean, you have time to rectify that. As a teacher or principal, you sometimes only have one shot, and then you have to figure out, how am I going to fix this? Because you can't have a kid who doesn't trust you or won't speak to you or whatever. It's really a challenging job. And when people talk about how easy teaching is, I just feel like, go spend one day in a classroom. Do you know that they did research once that suggested that teachers make 50 decisions a minute in classrooms? No wonder they're tired. Education is the most important tool we have for changing things for the better. And the people who work in classrooms with kids, with young adults and with older adults, they're making change in those rooms. And anything you can do to support that, you should do. I am planning to start a podcast. I'm going to learn what a podcast is, and I'm going to start a podcast, and it's going to be called The Door is Open. And it's about the door for change in education. We don't have to be testing anymore. And if every system in every state stopped doing the standardized testing they're doing, that would free up millions of dollars a year in every school system. Not millions of dollars per state, millions of dollars per school system, which could be applied to a million other things, a million different priorities. And we're not doing it, and I don't understand it. So I've decided to
That's awesome.
follow my Elizabeth Gurley Flynn roots and become a voice for change, because I can't stand it. I truly cannot stand it. We have a tool for change. We should be using it.
Yes.
But anyway.
I'll be listening to it about Bobby.
Yeah.
But when I think of him, the time that I spent with him as a student, I think of the word kindness. And he used to say radical
kindness.
And I love that. And if you can say, a little bit of how was your experience with him as a friend, as a colleague?
I can't without crying. He and I operated on the same wavelength. We're very different as people, of course, you know that. But I understood his values in the classroom. He understood mine. I respected his vision for education. He respected mine. And we had a lot of fun together. He was my best friend. And I spent some time thinking about his vision of how things should go and how that colors what I choose to do and stuff. And it's tricky because he was the mother, I was the father, and now people are looking to me like, well, you have to be the mother too, and I'm kind of like, well, I'm really more of a father. You know, in all honesty, I lean that way. You know, education is moving in a way that I think is not good. It's very product oriented. It's very transactional. Oh, you did your homework. Oh, you get a buck. Oh, you came in and sat down quietly. Oh, you know, choose something from the goodie tray. All this stuff, and it makes kids feel like it's a transaction. And the idea of inspiring people to learn, or engaging people in learning, or exciting people by what you put together in a classroom, that is becoming an old-fashioned approach, and which chokes me. But we act as though that human piece should be left behind in the interest of efficiency, in the interest of achievement, whatever that means. But I would argue that that human piece, that is where achievement lies. That is where understanding lies. Because that's what we're after. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference if people know what year the Civil War ended. It honestly just doesn't matter. But it matters very much that they understand about the inequity and people of conscience who pushed for change in the system of slavery in this country and the perspective of the oppressed and all that stuff. That matters. That's the human piece. And that's Bob. You know, that's from Bob. Mm-hmm. That perspective and that commitment to having it my way. I got that from him. Because he was a pit bull. He would never let it go. And that's, you know, an admirable quality, frankly.
Yes. But I don't know if you want to maybe sing a little song for us.
I'm not singing.
Yeah. I remember I was telling her that one time you share beautiful. So first she was like saying stuff. I was like, I don't think she has a good voice.
You know.
And then,
well, my mother told me that I didn't
yes.
have a good voice. The song that I sang in that with Guns Again, I'd rather be dancing. And every time I sang that song, Bob would cry. Every single time. Because it's about standing up for what you believe in, you know.
Thank you so much for sharing and for opening your heart to us here today, your house. And
oh, it's my pleasure.
Yes, I really hope everybody enjoy. I'm still emotional.
You know I was always the one I could never stand idly by. I watched while the bullies beat up on the weaker ones. I had to do something to try. And I never gave up on people, though we could be better somehow. Morality's compass, you gave it to me, and I still follow.